Is he
Give us the go-ahead.
All right, you ready to go?
ready? Okay. Let's call the Airport Commission meeting to order. And you all have an agenda, I presume, so let's get started through the agenda. We need an approval of the minutes from the June 10th meeting. They're attached. I assume you've all seen them. Need a motion for that?
I so move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, that takes care of that. Update, under old business, update of the status of the primary runway reconstruction project, visual nav aids. So far, I think, yeah, do you know anything about it?
I don't know anything.
Mr. Chair,
They're still working.
Mr. Chair, Brian Page from Mead Hunt was going to discuss the status of the nav aids, and I know there has been some consternation and concern, but I think we've got them straightened out now.
Okay,
Yeah, I think most of the gremlins, so to speak, I guess, are hopefully resolved now. I mean, we did a lot of work and a lot of different things to the nav aids out there over the course of the runway project. So just a matter of getting everything and tweaking everything to make sure that everything is working correctly. Do you need me to? I was actually going to refer to the.
Microphone, and we'll catch it for the broadcast.
Okay. Try to see if I can manage here. I guess to. Use
If
this
you just
drawing
stand
as
on
well,
this
but-
side and put the microphone this way,
Oh, gotcha.
that should work.
Okay. A few of the things that we worked on as part of the project, of course, Tom and Mr. Chairman and some of the rest of the pilots out there may know some of the, more intimately, some of the NavAid work that we did. But essentially, as part of the project, there was a new approach lighting system put in on runway 33. And that was installed and basically commissioned this last spring. We talked a little bit about that. There was some issues with just some of the radio frequency on that, and subsequently found out that it was a bad connection in the radio receiver panel that sits inside the facility that's off the south end of that runway. So that had been addressed, and everything seems to be working okay. Maybe you could, I
well,
guess,
it
speak to.
is now, but we went for about 6 weeks. I mean, it seemed like an inordinate amount of time for something like that.
Yeah, and we run into that quite a bit, Mr. Chairman. Just some of the things that, some of the equipment that's used out there is pretty specialized type of equipment. And when you run into situations with a lot of those navigational aids, there's not a XYZ navigational aid store right up the street somewhere where you can go and buy the parts. In a lot of cases, you actually have to order them. And it's kind of a thing that a lot of cases they don't carry those things in stock, so then they actually have to go out to their manufacturer and place an order for it. So just to speak a little bit, I mean, it's not unusual for aviation and specialized stuff to take a little time. But nevertheless, I certainly appreciate the patience. Working with the contractor, all of the issues that have been taking place out there are all under warranty, so the contractor has been coming back and fixing them at his cost. When we run into the issues. But the approach lights, knock on wood, should be up and running. There shouldn't be any issues with those that I'm aware of currently. Just recently, what had happened, more recently, probably within the last couple of months or so, is the north end PAPI units, which is an approach lighting system off on the north end. There were a couple of boxes up there that apparently it had sustained some damage of some kind. And the theory is perhaps it could have been a lightning strike. But nevertheless, whatever it was, there was a power surge that ended up, one of the bulbs, it's a big halogen bulb that there's actually 2 of them in each one of these boxes. And there was such a surge inside that box that it actually shattered the bulb on the inside. So that only happens if you get a good, power, wallop, if you would. And a lot of times what happens is lightning can strike or strike somewhere in the proximity, and that can happen. But in essence, the contractor was called back again to the job site, came out, and they did replace 2 of the circuit boards on the inside. It was actually box number 2, and then the outside box number 4. They had to replace the circuit boards in there and also replace some of the transformers on the inside of those boxes, and then replaced all the bulbs that were currently out. So They did that, got them back up and running again, and I don't know if you've been out there.
Yeah, I
Mr.
have.
Chairman,
They're
but-
working now.
Okay.
But I guess, one of the questions I would have is a little bit, it went, I knew they were out, it was right after this meeting in June that I thought, well, first of all, just one of the lights was out. And then all of a sudden, nothing worked. And I thought, okay, but that was by about mid-June. So I thought, well, okay, something's got to get fixed. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and finally I called Steve. I said, Steve, when you gonna fix the Pappy lights out there? Well, he didn't know about this. Now, you got people out there all the time. Didn't they know? They must have known about this.
Well,
And-
yes, they did.
How come they didn't tell Steve? That's maybe my
Mr.
main
Chair,
question.
I have to apologize to you. Brian reminded me of when he told me, and I should have been aware of it, but I was not. So I was incorrect telling you that I hadn't known, I had forgotten. So I trusted Brian to kind of follow up on it, and he did eventually, but I appreciate your calling me anyhow.
Okay,
Yeah, there sometimes is a little period of time there, and that's, we talked to Dan a little bit about too, is having Dan be more or less, he's out there every day, even sometimes when we're not there. He gets the reports that come in from the pilots and so forth, so if something isn't working correctly, we'll hear it from him. But sometimes there is a little bit of a delay there, Mr. Chairman, that it might be a period of time might lapse between the time that we're actually made aware of it, that we can actually call the contractor and start coordinating it and figuring out what's going on. But I can assure you, once we find out about it, we're right then on the spot, we're dealing with it. So, and it does, again, when you get into specialized pieces of equipment like this, it's not that you can just go to a 1-800 number and, tomorrow they deliver the stuff. I mean, in a lot of cases, it does take some time to be able to get the equipment shipped, out to the job site. And then you have to get the qualified contractor to come in to install it. So it does take a little bit of time, to actually get all that coordinated and taken care of. But the upshot to it is the issues and the gremlins that they're working through, again, are all warranty issues. Contractor has been good about coming back and just taking care of all of these things as part of that ongoing runway development project.
okay, now, but I, kind of two other related questions. I just updated my approach plates today, and the GPS 1.5 approach is still not authorized for night operation. Why is that?
The nighttime operation, as I understand, was an issue surrounding some obstructions that were actually out there in the approach end on the north end of that runway. And there was an issue with some trees that the FAA had indicated that was out next to the highway. Those trees have been gone for quite some time. The FAA is just kind of slow to react to actually getting it into the system, and there's a queuing process that needs to take place to actually get it in the queue to be able to make it into the facilities directory. And that process, usually it takes up to 6 months, if not more, for that to actually take place before it comes out in the actual publication of where you actually see like the terminal facilities directories and so forth throughout the country.
But who notifies the FAA of that?
The FAA is aware of it, and the
Okay,
FAA
but
is
whose job is it to notify? Is it yours or is it the city's?
well, it's generally, it comes from the sponsor more often than not. I mean, the sponsor is the person that's responsible for the airport, but a lot of times they'll work through the consultant. In this case, the city has worked through us as the consultant to actually get on these things and get them addressed and coordinated with the FAA, which is taking place, but it is a process that does take some time to actually get the updates and so forth in there. So they're aware of it, they're fully aware of it, and it's a process that just needs to kind of run its course.
Okay. I hope that gets done pretty soon because we're getting into shorter days and a lot of us operate at night. And, theoretically, if you, well, not theoretically, as practically, if you shot an instrument approach to that runway at night, that's a violation. And that wouldn't go so good either. But,
Right.
and so you understand where I'm coming
Absolutely,
from.
absolutely.
I mean, they need to do something about that.
You bet. If it'll help moving forward, what we'll do is make sure that we're keeping everybody in the loop, and making sure that Steve is aware, I guess, as to what the process is and what's taking place, I guess, as far as the communication and the coordination of making these things take place. I can say there's been a little bit of turnover as well at the FAA level, and that's a little bit of what's going on here. The person, the coordinator for this airport is, since has retired, and you would think they would have checks and balances in place, but nevertheless, it does take some time to, to get through these processes with just people. And this time of year, is usually kind of a slow time of year to make things happen within the FAA. A lot of times what they're looking at right now is funding issues, getting the grants out the door, so they're a little bit distracted right now. But rest assured, we'll get on this and make sure that things are being coordinated as swiftly as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So, anybody have any thoughts or questions?
Nope, I don't.
All right, let's go on to the next item, the status of the taxiway reconstruction project.
Okay, the status of the taxiway construction project, things are moving along quite nicely on that project. I would say we're probably about, to put a number on it, about 35% of the way complete. I'll pass around a copy of these reports, which is just basically for your background information that kind of gives you an idea of what's been going on out there, where we're at budget-wise.
Thank you.
Also a contract time, just so you can. Do we want a copy? You've probably seen them anyway. This report is a little bit dated, but at the same time, it gives a good representation or a snapshot of where things are. Most of the north end work that was to be included under Schedule 1, which was the north part of the taxiway, is essentially complete at this point. There's some electrical work that still needs to take place, but as far as all the grading and the paving and so forth is concerned, all of that's done. They have currently shifted their operations. When I say north end, I'm talking about this piece coming off the ramp and coming down and wrapping around to the north approach. From this point going south, this is the piece that they're currently working on, going all the way down to the south end of the project limits. What they have already done is removed the existing pavement that was there and did the subcutting or sub-excavation down to the point, and they're in the process of putting in the drainage work and rebuilding that pavement section to bring it back up to paving. And the schedule is to get all of that work, drainage and everything included, done by the end of August, and look at probably sometime after Labor Day, maybe the second week of September, to come in to pave that south end, starting at the extension where you see in blue, coming all the way up to the ramp. And that area will be paved. Hopefully by about the third week of September, they should be done. Shouldn't take much more than about a week to get all that pavement in. Then the next thing on the list will be to come in and put all of the taxiway edge lighting in, along with the signage. Most of the work inside the electrical vault has already taken place. So the new transformer and the power supply inside the electrical vault has already been installed. There's also a new control panel that's been installed in the fixed base operator facility out there. So a lot of that work is already, they've leaned forward and gotten a lot of that done. So now we're just looking at getting the rest of the paving, getting the lighting in. And once that's done, or running concurrently with that, there's also another schedule to take care of some of the concrete paving out in front of the terminal building. The contractor has been notified a couple of different times. We'd like to try to get that done sometime in the month of August here, so we can at least get it done. You get some cure time on it in order to be able to be prepared for traffic to be put on it during the fly-in that's going to occur the first week of September. So we've got a breakout point. If a contractor can't get in to get it done before then, he's going to have to wait till after the fly-in is over with, just to make sure that we don't have any open holes or any pavement, I guess, that's been removed out there during the time of the fly-in. So with barring any weather delays or anything, we should be looking at wrapping up that project by the end of September, early October.
Any other
No.
questions or comments? Okay. Okay, the relocated crosswind runway development, item C.
Okay, to talk a little bit about that, hopefully the board members should all have a copy of the draft scope of services that, basically outlines what it is that needs to take place as part of the Crosswind runway development. At the last meeting that we had, the board had voted to move forward with that project in order to be able to poise, the airport and to be able to prepare for the ever encroaching part of the city that's getting closer and closer, the development getting closer and closer to the airport, which in essence is going to render the existing Crosswind runway almost unusable, which it almost is today for a variety of different reasons. So with the overall schedule of what it is that needs to take place in the planning and in the environmental side of things with a project of this magnitude these days, you're looking at roughly about 3 years in the planning and the scoping process before you'd ever be able to turn dirt out there on the job site. So the first step starts with, okay, what do we need to do to plan for this ultimate runway development? I'll step back here for a second. There was quite a bit of work done for some of the members of the board that may remember quite a few years ago. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of talk that took place, probably starting in about roughly about 2003 or 2004. Quite a bit of work that took place back in that era. Mainly for the overall airfield development, but part of which, a significant part of that discussion did discuss the Crosswind runway, what the plans were going to be for it and how the airport was going to develop and what the ultimate disposition of that existing turf runway was going to be. What has happened is when the project for the runway or the main runway development started, the focus kind of turned toward that for the time being. And over the course of probably the next 3 or 4 years, the main runway development took place and unfolded and moved forward. Well, along the way, this project has been kind of sitting, if you would, in the wings that entire period of time. And there was quite a bit of work done and a little bit of environmental work that was also done during that process. But what has happened is because of the time frame that has passed between that period of time and now, the FAA has got quite a few different more criteria to look at. There's some new regulations that we need to see how that new runway development will coincide with some of those new regulations. And in essence, they do want us to go back and re-examine a lot of the planning work that was done, in addition to look a little bit more into the justification for the project and whether or not that alignment that's currently shown in the airport layout plan is the best and most, least impacting alignment that there is. And after looking into some of the planning work that was done back in that era, not that anything was done wrong, I just don't think that that was the focus or the emphasis then. And after taking a look at it, there are a few, I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed, so to speak, that would typically need to take place for any sort of, project of that magnitude. So that's in essence what this scope is about. We did meet with the agencies. We met with MnDOT and also the FAA to sit down with the folks that this documents and the planning work and coordination would actually be going through. And this is the culmination of that meeting when we sat down with them, what they are going to be looking for or expecting the city to do to be able to move forward with the project. The FAA has been pretty adamant that this year they have no federal dollars to be able to spend for this work. But on the other hand, the state has said that there's plenty of money from the state perspective, provided that we could get started on this project very soon. The longer it waits, the more it goes into fall. A lot of the funding that's out there and available right now gets spoken for, and the deal might not be out there, or the offer might not be out there, say a month from now, 2 months from now, whatever the case may be, which isn't the end of the world. But again, kind of going back to that 3-year window that it takes to actually get out there and break ground, it just means that, you're that much further down the road. And I don't know if anybody has any ideas, as to where we're going to be 3 years from now in relationship to the Sarah Hills development as opposed to where the existing runway is, but safe to say there's probably gonna be a little bit more development out there to contend with. So the sooner the better that we get started, and the purpose of this scope was to have you look at it. If everything is good, we're gonna move forward. There's no real action that needs to take place tonight, but if anything, it's more for informational purposes. And what we'll do is we plan to take this and get a contract task order scoped out, get that down to MnDOT, and have MnDOT issue a grant offer to the city to be able to move forward with the project.
Now, am I correct in understanding that somewhere along the line, the zoning issues all get dealt with as well?
Yes.
Steve, I know at one time, we've talked about this at other times, and the zoning from the east there is getting kind of tight already, and we better, if we're gonna do something, we should probably get it done before.
Yes, Mr. Chair, but I think at this point in time, we need to reevaluate the location or the proposed location, and then, once that's nailed down, then we would move into the zoning, safety zoning and land use zoning. Is that how you see it, Brian?
Exactly. I was just going to point out that taking a look at the scope, if you go to the last page on page 6, it actually kind of outlines what some of the next steps will actually be for this project. Zoning is certainly going to be a part of this. Zoning will be its own independent contract to be able to move through that process, but that'll be certainly one of the items that will need to be listed on here as one of the very next steps. But as Steve has indicated, before you launch into the zoning, there's going to be some zoning updates that are going to need to take place for the primary runway. There's also, once the Crossland runway is in its final planned, I guess, location or preferred alternative, as we call it, it will certainly need zoning. For many of you, maybe just to kind of recap a little bit, there is no zoning currently in place for the existing Crosswind runway, and there goes part of the issues that have been kind of ongoing with that runway. Currently, that runway, for many of you that are out at the airport probably know, but it's a turf strip that basically goes off in this direction and goes right over the Sarah Hills across Airport Road, or Highland Avenue, I'm sorry. And goes out into that subdivision, but currently there is no zoning in place for the city to be able to use to be able to kind of control the environment out at the end of that approach. So as the housing gets closer and closer, it basically means this runway either has to shift or it gets shorter and shorter to the point that it almost becomes unusable. Because there are certain safety areas at the end of the runway that need to be met. I just, kind of recapping a little bit on some of the meetings that took place. Were any of the members of the board here back in that era?
I wasn't.
Okay,
I was here for part of it.
okay,
Chairman was, yeah.
okay. I'm just, there's been some discussion about that, about some of the meetings that took place. There was plenty of, justification, I think, back then that we will probably need to be able to maybe use it as a resource, if anything, to maybe some of the historical events that took place back then. Perhaps even provide some of the justification for the new process that we're going to need to go through. But we will need to be talking to users, doing a user survey, finding out what kind of needs that they actually have out there, and basically walking through a lot of the steps that took place back then. Kind of retracing some of those steps just to make sure that we fill in all the blanks.
So, having heard what you said, that we maybe need to at least be open to the idea of a different positioning and configuration of that runway if we decide to go ahead.
It's possible. We're going to have to go through the planning process again, and based on just going through some of the new criteria and some of the new processes that are in place, it could mean that there may be a different alignment. My thoughts are, just looking at it, I don't think there's going to be much it is gonna be able to be done with the existing alignment. There was talk about possibly shifting that further off to the southwest and be able to go out into the field far enough to be able to make that work. But you can immediately see there's, this residence or this farm that's out here would be immediately impacted, and depending on how far you go, that one could be impacted. One of the criteria at the time to shifting the runway and going out west with it is this was not going to impact any family businesses in the area. It was simply a matter of land. And as I understand, looking back at some of the information and notes that were provided at the time, this is kept by design very close to the existing section line as well, so it would have least impact of subdividing different properties or parcels, if you would, along the way as well. But one of the things I think we're gonna be looking at is possibly shifting this runway and bringing it back closer to the midfield area back here, so we can eliminate some of the length of this taxiway. That could be something, but I think it's gonna stay on that same alignment, and the reason I say that is it's least impacting to any sort of businesses or any sort of farmland that would be taken as part of the process. In addition to, as far as wind coverage is concerned, that alignment in this configuration has the ideal alignment in terms of providing wind coverage for the airport. There's a certain characteristic at any airport that the wind tends to blow in certain directions. And what you're trying to do as part of your overall runway alignment and development is provide an alignment that provides at least a 95% of the time coverage between either the primary runway or the secondary runway. And right now you don't have that. Right now you're a little bit shy of that. So even in this configuration would not be ideal as far as wind coverage is concerned. So the question was raised by someone at FAA, whether or not we could look at that, and we'll certainly do that and look at that, but I don't know if that's gonna be probably the preferred alternative. I think we're gonna right back to doing something very similar to the blue line.
Could that be pushed to the east and have enough clear zone out to the east, though, to make
Could.
that work?
It could. And those are just exactly the type of things that we're gonna be looking at. Back in the era that this was done, I can tell you there was a lot of emphasis on and a lot of interest, if you would, made by FAA about intersecting runways. And particularly if you had a threshold of a runway that overlapped with another primary or an existing paved surface out there. And reason being is at uncontrolled facilities, there was a lot of issues there, and there has been some incidents and some incursions that have been created just because of, just people not talking to each other and so forth. It happens, so there was a lot of emphasis back in the day about purposely making sure that there wasn't gonna be any sort of overlap between the two. But then when you do that, you gotta make sure that you got certain safety area criteria that you need to meet in this area to make sure that there wasn't gonna be any issues with the primary runway if an aircraft was sitting on that runway end. So that's why it was pushed so far off to the west. But there are some new criteria now that can be followed that can minimize it, and ultimately, we believe maybe save some cost to the overall development by pulling that a little bit further back to the east.
A question I have, and I'm really new into all this, but that blue line then is gonna be the other runway.
That'll be the new.
That's what, yeah,
Correct. This will be the new crosswind runway. This is all proposed development, including the blue line that you see back here that cuts off the end of that approach, goes down, and then also goes in this. This would actually become what they call a taxiway.
okay,
So
okay,
this would be how the aircraft would actually, once they're on the ground, how they would get back to the terminal area. But then this area here would be the primary runway itself, and then the smaller blue line that's above that is the parallel taxiway.
okay.
And again, not to say all that would have to be done at once. You could do a phase type of a development, just put the runway in and just give access to be able to get back and forth to the terminal building for the time being. Look at doing the taxiway down the road. So it all depends on a matter of cost and I guess what kind of funding we can get, be able to get the project off the ground. No doubt the FAA and MnDOT are in support of the project. They recognize something needs to be done, but they just want us to make sure that we, basically cover all the bases.
And somebody's doing that as we speak, correct?
Yes.
That's good.
The wheels turn.
Yeah.
They turn, but I
Just
can
gonna
tell you
take
they
time
turn
and-
slow. We
Yeah.
deal with this on a day-to-day basis, and they turn, but they're pretty slow to turn, I can say.
But I think we all need to be cognizant of the fact that the old crosswind, that 422 configuration, just can't stay that way for
Yeah.
very long.
No, that I can see. That's why I was wondering, wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
that was the line. I mean, that was the runway.
I don't, and maybe, Mr. Chairman, you might be able to speak to it, but I don't know if these individuals were part of that planning process back then. I was not, so I guess I can't speak from experience, but I was curious whether or not any of them came out during that process to talk about and be interested in what was going to happen, because if this runway is kept, the existing runway, even right now, I would imagine that, when aircraft are using that runway, they can tend to be pretty noisy and there could be some impacts, and it would only get worse as, time goes on.
I'd say most of the use of that runway right now is for very light stuff that can't handle significant crosswinds. Most of your, faster, more powerful aircraft can handle some pretty decent crosswinds. I mean, not terrible, but I know at one time, and I'm not sure just how it's all going today, because I don't see it as much as I did at one time, but that runway, that short crosswind runway, was extremely popular for training. Mankato people used to come over here a lot to practice crosswind landings.
Interesting.
Because in fairly light stuff, because it's a good cross to the main runway, and it's, when you look at it, it's grass, but it's very wide. It's an ideal training environment for inexperienced people. Landing is, left, right can get a little bit hairy at times, and
Yeah.
it's really good for that. So I don't know. And maybe, I mean, I'm not going to push one way or the other right now, but maybe 3,000 feet of grass going out from the west, starting as close as possible to the northwest southeast configuration, just a grass runway to accommodate people like that would be okay. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I fly a fairly high performance airplane, and the only time I ever use that thing is when it's really blowing hard out of the southwest, and because it is pretty short. But if you're landing into a strong headwind, it's okay. And it's grass; it slows you down a lot anyway.
Sure. That's a good point, and I guess I wasn't aware that some of the students were using it as a training facility, but I did want to point out that the blue line and what's being proposed here is being proposed to actually put that back in paved and
I know.
make a paved surface. And the reason for that, from near as I can tell, reading through some of the planning documents, is, as you know, a turf runway really isn't going to get a whole lot of use in the winter. It's pretty tough to kind of keep those things even open. Some places do it, but it takes a pretty I guess concerted effort, I guess, to keep all that width and everything, and then keep the piles of snow and everything knocked down. But in essence, if we could put a paved surface in there, it might get a lot more use and utility, particularly different times of the year when the winds are favoring that direction a little bit more strongly. So that would be, some of the added benefits. Now, whether or not this runway configuration right now, I think, shows it going out to 5,000 or 4,000 feet. And That is not, that probably wouldn't be done. There would be an interim length, and the interim length would probably be closer to that 3,000 foot length. And that was the other part of what we were going to look into, along with maybe moving it back to the east. Just really what makes sense, right now, for the airport. Just so when it gets to the point that the development encroaches on that crosswind runway and basically renders that crosswind runway almost unusable, which it almost is today, just that way at least the airport isn't losing anything and losing any sort of service that it currently provides, that you've got a plan in place to be able to develop it. It might take a year or two to get there, but at least you got a plan and you're moving in the right direction. And that's kind of the purpose behind, going through this process. And then we can get into the whole question, I guess, is it lighted right away? What kind of navigational aids will go on it? Just a whole, series of other questions, I guess, that will be unfolded during the course of this process. So, in the course of the process, it might not be a bad idea to have either a committee, or if the full board would like to participate in that decision-making process. There are some meetings set up as part of this, and typically I've seen it done both ways. I mean, that there's a few, members of a committee that report back to the rest of the members of the board, or if the rest of the whole board as an aggregate would like to take place in that planning process. Whichever way, I guess, that you feel is the best way to go. So but that would be something to take a look at. And then the next step, of course, once we got through the process and got approvals on the planning, the next step would be to get into the land acquisition process as well. We'd have to get started on that land acquisition process sooner than later. As many of you know, the last land process that took place out at the airport took quite a few years to get it, finally get settled. And that would be the other thing we'd want to get started on this just as soon as we can. I think there's, somewhere in the order of maybe 5 or 6 different landowners that would be currently impacted by that plan.
Ooh, that many, yeah. Well, I guess there really isn't anything more we as a group can do right now. I mean, this is just.
No real action. It's just more to kind of let you know that the wheels are turning on that.
Okay.
We're moving forward and coordinating with the proper agencies. We've been waiting for the federal grant season to kind of get toward the end, which it is coming to an end now. And that would determine what kind of money the state would have available to be able to help out for this project. And after meeting with the state program manager just last Friday, he said, let's go. If they want to do it, let's get this thing moving forward. So that's kind of where we're at. But in the days ahead, what we'll be doing is putting a fee to this, also with a task order, and then getting the approvals down to MnDOT, so MnDOT can turn around and issue an offer to the city to be able to move forward for the project.
Now, when you say the project, you mean just the study?
Just the study, correct. It's kind of an incremental, type of a process that takes place. And then there will ultimately need to be some environmental work done. But right now, the agencies felt that it would have been premature to be able to dive into what sort of environmental is needed. Now, we do have an environmental document that did cover that existing crosswind runway, but or even with the new runway. But the problem of it is again, that determination came out in 2010, I believe, and the shelf life is after 3 years you have to reevaluate it. Beyond 3 years, you pretty much have to go back and cover a lot of the bases again. Well, we're in year 4, so they are going to ask that we have to go through that process. Now, that said, I think it is going to be an abbreviated process because a lot of the conditions and a lot of the impacts, provided the runway stays somewhere close to its existing location, a lot of the impacts are going to be the same. So, there may be a few things that we need to examine, but it's not going to be a full comprehensive EA. Any other questions on that?
I'm good.
No.
Mr. Chairman, if we could, I did want to, maybe before we go beyond, I guess, item 2B, one of the things I did want to bring to the board tonight and point out is during the course of the construction out there on the taxiway, once we got into phase 2, excuse me, there was a wire that was hit essentially alongside this taxiway and about where the crosswind, right on the south side of where the turf runway crosses over the taxiway. And coming to find, no records existed that or no records showed that that wire even existed. So it was kind of a surprise. But as it turns out, what it does, or what the wire was for, is a primary feed for the non-directional beacon, which the NDB is located out here in this patch that you see, this lighter colored patch just to the east of the taxiway. And at any rate, patch the wire all back together again. It's all good. Everything's up and running, no problems. But it does beg the bigger question. As part of the project, the contractor had their electrician come out and will locate the wire for the rest of the run. The wire essentially goes down and parallels the taxiway down to a point where it is almost perpendicular to where that site is. And it makes a shot directly east out to that site is kind of how it goes. And talking, through it, it sounds like the wire was probably put out there in the late 1970s, maybe 1980s at some point. And I guess that begs another question. I mean, it's getting quite aged, if you would, and probably should be replaced anyway. But the question becomes, is the serviceability and the future of the NDB at the airport? And I guess as part of the project, what we need to do is we need to put in a fairly substantial ditch line that cuts off and parallels that taxiway as part of it. And the ditch cut is going to get down to the point that wire is going to have to be relocated because it's going to be in the ditch cut, eventually. So the question becomes is how much is the NDB used? Could it be decommissioned? NDBs are going away at a lot of airports throughout the country. This one, MnDOT has raised the question in the past whether or not it's used any longer, or if the users are indifferent to it, could do away with it. In a lot of cases, if the NDB was the only approach, that the airport had, it might be a little bit different picture. But there are other approaches that the airport has, GPS type approaches and so forth, that are non-NDB, I guess, reliant, if you would. So they're pretty much independent of having that thing out there or not. So, Mr. Chairman, maybe you can speak to it. I don't know in a pilot community, I guess, what your thoughts are on it.
Right. I don't know anybody who does NDB approaches anymore. For one thing, they're not very precise, and they a lot of people don't know how to do them anymore.
Right.
And the GPS-based stuff is so good
Superior.
that I updated the avionics in our airplane a number of years ago, and it just got rid of that NDB part of the stuff. Most people are doing it, and you're right in that the approaches, when you look at approach plates and stuff now, there aren't very many of them left anyway. So if that went away, I'm not sure that it would be a big deal. In fact, it might be a wise thing to save some money.
I was gonna say, it's almost like having Morse code again, but
Yeah.
we need
Right.
to have a motion
Really,
and vote
This might
to.
be the time to think about that, rather than replace that.
Well, when we get into projects like this and we're going to impact something out there, and now that we know about it, certainly I guess we would do everything we need to do as far as the project limits are concerned. But that wire right now, where it gets its primary feed, it's actually a primary wire feed, by the way, which we found that, well, the operator, I guess, found that out, I guess, the hard way. But nevertheless, he was okay and everything. There wasn't any injuries. But at the same time, it runs all the way back and then parallels the turf runway, and eventually comes around the backside of the development and goes into a transformer on the backside of the terminal building and parking lot. And then there's, of course, a transformer out at the site itself to be able to step up, step down, and run it out there. But it's a big wire that runs out there. And it'd be replaced within the project limits, but it begs the question, you'd still have a leg of it or a segment of it going all the way back to that transformer that certainly we could do it as part of the project, but you're looking at thousands of dollars to be able to replace all that wire. And if it's a facility that there's any chance that it might be decommissioned, is it really spending money wisely? I guess at this point. So, again, I don't know if we need a decision right now, but I just, if anything, wanted to make the board aware of it and see if you had any thoughts, or if somebody says, well, no, Joe uses that thing still to get in and out. It's only, it's all he's got in his aircraft, and, that's all he can use. Or if it's, the comment that Mr. Chairman made that, maybe there isn't, I guess, any need to keep it, more or less to try to get that general consensus as what you're thinking, and to maybe have you guys talking to the pilot community out there, or we can do it, and ask them, is there anybody that would really scream bloody murder if that thing was out tomorrow?
That might not be a bad idea, just to get an opinion. I mean, you have access to who has airplane space there. To just put out a quick, it wouldn't take very long, just a quick phone call or email or something to find out. But I think you would find that, I mean, people who fly instrument approaches would pretty much do them all GPS now, and NDB. I mean, they're the recreational flyers that like to fly around on nice days, and that's fine. But they don't need that anyway. They never use it.
Right.
I think Dan would be a good guy to talk to on that.
Dan could probably tell us.
Dan's already given me his opinion on it, and it was,
His opinion was forget it. Yeah.
Maybe for on the next meeting,
Okay, but now is a good time to ask that question.
ask other pilots.
And
Yeah.
well, Dan had given me the contact information for the pilot for Christensen Farms. He said he'd probably want to contact him. I was going to follow up with Chuck and talk to him a little bit about it too, with the FBO there. So find out. But I think either one of them, again, are flying more sophisticated aircraft that chances are, they're not using it, but they may know somebody that is, So I can share with you as well that MnDOT would just as soon see it go away, as well, because MnDOT's got some skin in the game and taking care of it, So, they've already asked, is it something that they need? Could it be decommissioned?
And that equipment is getting pretty old. There could be failures and then an expensive replacement. And like I say again, and the NDB is just an obsolete concept, where GPS is so good, and it's it doesn't require any facilities on the airport. It's all off of satellites, of course, and really everybody that I know that flies seriously, even for fun, they got some kind of a GPS unit. And
It does work well until you blow a fuse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, I guess if you're looking for an opinion, I realize all I can give you is an opinion, but my opinion would be that
Mine too.
it might be wise to just, this might be a good time just to decommission the NDB and let it go into history.
Okay.
Maybe put it on the agenda for next meeting and
Okay, we can do that.
Vote on it then, maybe,
Do you have
after-
enough time to make
Yeah, absolutely. We talked to the contractor. The contractor doesn't intend to get into that area where the wire is going to be. Even if he does, it's going to have to be taken out of service for a period of time, even if they're going to drop a new wire in there, because they'll need to cut it off on both ends and, make it, turn it off essentially. You get the power out of it, do their work, and then put the wire back in there again, but maybe we just don't have to put it back in. But if anything, I wanted to bring it to the board's attention and make sure you guys are in the loop with it. We'll start the communication and coordination process on that, but I just didn't want us to be doing anything that, that might be beyond you guys' wishes at this point. But if you're okay with that, that's what we'll start that
Well, I
process.
appreciate the heads up.
Okay.
Anything
Okay,
else?
that was about all I had, I guess, related to that, but I appreciate, I guess, the board's patience, I guess. I kind of backtracking a little bit there.
Have we kind of covered the A of the new business? I think we have, haven't we?
Yep.
Talked about,
Mr.
Yep.
Chair, that actually was a little different task, but
Okay.
maybe we could do it quickly. I think Mr.
Okay.
Landau has to leave.
Absolutely.
It just is updating the property inventory map, and we do have a contract with that already.
That's right. And there is some title search that needs to be done, just to make sure that all the properties and everything are free and clear. Last time, that near as we can tell, that anything to any significant degree was done was in the early 1980s. So it's high time that a new Exhibit A probably be done with some of the recent acquisitions and some acquisitions that have taken place over the last several decades. So.
Okay.
So we're in the process getting started. We're actually having Hugh Nierengarten's office help us with some of the title background and search work here locally. So got the local expert in town working on it.
Does that pretty well cover things that we need to know now, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, new business B, we need to set the next meeting, for September 9th. I think
Yeah,
we should do that.
I make a motion that the next meeting be September 9th.
I'll second.
Okay, in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay. And, okay, I guess it's time for adjournment, so I need a motion
move.
for adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yep, thanks.